Good evening, everyone. Oh, I'm from a Baptist church. When I say good evening, I'll expect people to say good evening back. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will read the rules and kind of stick to this agenda and get us out of here in time for whatever late night program we want to watch on the television tonight, all right? My name is Chris Ellis, and I am the chair of the George Biddle Kelly Education Foundation, a proud member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and a member of the Albany branch of the NAACP. I am serving tonight as the moderator for this candidates forum, and I'm excited. This is the second one I've done. The first one was for the 109th and 110th Assembly Districts, and this is for the 20th Congressional District. Very excited. I had to go back and revisit some of my civics. There are 435 congressional districts in the United States. There are 27 in New York,
Good going.
of which this is the 20th, I believe covering all of Albany County, all of Schenectady County, portions of Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Montgomery County. Did I do that right? Mm-hmm. Thank you, I appreciate that. I had a cheat sheet up here, but I still got through it anyway. So just a couple of housekeeping items for tonight. The forum candidate rules. Each candidate will be given 5 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes each in response to audience questions. All questions are coming from the audience tonight, so if you could think of some really good policy or fiscal questions for our candidates tonight, now is the time to ask. We will close, each candidate will be given the opportunity to close with a 2-minute statement as well. Candidates have chosen lots, or we've done a coin toss, and Mr. Tonko will open first and close first, and Mr. Fischer will open second and close last. We have a timer who sits in full view of both candidates and will indicate the available time using her nifty stoplight signs with the 1 minute mark marking the midpoint, the yellow card, which is 30 seconds, and the red card, which means wrap it up. And gentlemen, if we can't follow the rules, I'll go back to my football, basketball, wrestling, baseball, jeet kune do, and every other athletic thing that I do to remind us that we need to wrap it up. But we don't expect that. We ask that all questions from the audience be neutral in tone, and that each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to each question. And we ask that you please hold your applause until the discussion/debate candidate forum is over. The sponsors of tonight's event are the Albany branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the League of Women Voters of Albany County, the Capital Area Urban League, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the George Biddle Kelly Education Foundation, the Council of Albany Neighborhood Associations, the Capital Area Council of Churches, and the Reformed Jewish Voice of New York State. So without further ado, we know our candidates are in alphabetical order: Jim Fischer, Republican and Conservative, and Paul Tonko, Democrat, Independence and Working Families parties. Again, Mr. Tonko drew the heads, and we'll go first with his opening remarks for 5 minutes. Timer, are we ready? Absolutely. Mr. Tonko?
Thank you, Mr. Ellis, and good evening, everybody. I am Paul Tonko, and a candidate to serve the 20th Congressional District of New York in the 114th session of Congress. I would first like to issue some very important thank yous. I want to thank Mr. Ellis. I want to thank Chris Ellis for serving as our facilitator here this evening. I certainly want to thank our League of Women Voters for the timekeeping role that they're anxiously looking forward to, and want to thank the long list of hosts this evening who have made this forum possible. I want to thank the Myers Middle School for hosting us with their facility, and certainly want to thank our moderators who will, at the supper table here, facilitate us with questions. And I want to thank my opponent for offering a choice in New York's 20th District, and thank all of you for participating in what I think is a very important and meaningful discussion. The voters of the constituents, better said, of the 20th Congressional District of New York have formed their priorities. Chief amongst them is jobs. Jobs, the opportunity to work and the dignity of earning a paycheck. There can be no higher priority. I agree with that priority. They have further reinforced that assessment through many conversations that I have enjoyed through the routine visits in the Congressional District. Many conversations that challenge and certainly inspire me. They may range from those middle-aged workers who have been displaced from work through no fault of their own, and now find age to be a factor as they search for meaningful employment. Or it may be students who are not only challenged to find a job, but also, again, addressing a mountain of debt that developed in their pursuit of that college degree. Or it may be individuals and family members who are not only working one job, but perhaps two or three to make ends meet and sacrificing valuable family time. So these discussions are what inspire and motivate and encourage me. It's important work. To meet those principles, those priorities, we need to invest in certain orders of business. We need to invest in education and higher education so as to develop a strength called the human infrastructure, the workforce of today and tomorrow, and to do that with keen, laser-sharp focus. We also need to invest in infrastructure, making certain that that fundamental need of commerce is met. Not just our traditional roads and bridges, but broadband, wiring communities and neighborhoods, those perhaps that have been neglected, those that may be remotely rural, need to be addressed with technology, or infrastructure of high-speed rail and rail opportunities and ports and airports. We know that commerce depends upon a sound infrastructure. We need to help in that regard. And finally, investments in research to develop that prototype that when tested and proven true will develop the new product line not yet on the radar screen that enables us to maintain that pioneer spirit that is part of our DNA as an American society. So that's our highest priority. And right there ranked with that is the growing of the middle class and the protection of the middle class, making certain that those ladders of economic opportunity are provided so that people can tether their American dream, making certain they go forward so that they have more purchasing power that enables us to have more confidence in the economy and to then be able to bolster the business sector with that purchasing power. It's an across-the-board win situation. So also, it's about unfinished business, making certain that the plethora of issues ignored in the last 113th session of Congress are taken up with an aggressiveness, including a comprehensive energy plan, certainly efforts to provide for equal pay for equal work, or a transportation infrastructure reauthorization bill, or raising the minimum wage, or addressing a fundamental working immigration reform. The list goes on and on. I look forward this evening to discussing these issues, and thank you again for your attendance here this evening. It certainly means a lot.
Mr. Fischer?
All right. I also want to thank Mr. Ellis, for moderating the debate here, and thank the League of Women Voters for hosting, as well as the other organizations who are part of hosting this event. And particularly I want to thank the George Biddle Kelly Foundation for providing the videotaping of this. so that it will be available to all the residents of the 20th Congressional District to watch this at their convenience online. I really appreciate their generosity in offering that service. Ladies and gentlemen, every time an incumbent is up for re-election, the election is naturally a referendum on the incumbent. Certainly, you're going to be asking yourselves, who is this new guy? And should we, why should we put him in place of the incumbent? But it must come back to, what has the incumbent done during his time in office, and has he earned re-election? So, as much as I appreciate the time that I've gotten to know Congressman Tonko here personally, find him to be a very engaging man and a friendly man, and appreciate the conversations that we've had, it's important that we draw a contrast between the two of us and look at his record and then what I would do differently. Now, I'm running for Congress because I do believe it's time for a change here in NY20. Mr. Tonko has had 6 years in Washington, and he's failed us. In his commercials, he says that he listens to all of us, but it's clear that the only people he's truly been listening to too often in his career are his partisan leaders, such as Nancy Pelosi in Congress. He votes with her over 95% of the time, which is tied with one other congressman from New York City as the highest partisan percentage of any member of the New York Congressional delegation. I, on the other hand, will be a strong, independent voice representing the vast majority of centrist-minded voters in the Capital Region. Paul represents the most left-wing portion of his party and has embraced a vision for our economy akin to China's big government intervention. He supported turning Albany into a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants, and when I and so many residents stood opposed to that, he backpedaled away from it. If he'd had his way, the Albany Public Schools would be dealing with an influx of unexpected students with limited cultural and language understanding that would drain more resources from students who are already struggling under Common Core and its mandated testing, which he also supports. For the last 6 years, workers' wages have stagnated, except for those at the very top. That's why I've developed a 5-point plan called Thrive to get our economy growing at a faster rate so that we can all have a better future. And I support empowering local people and families to have better choices for education and career pathways so they can realize a brighter future. Now, I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Schenectady. My dad was a lifelong Democrat, and he was a union member, working at WGY and WRGB for 30-odd years. My mom was a secretary who worked many years at Ellis Hospital. After graduating from high school at Niskayuna in 1979, I went on to SUNY Cortland, where I got a degree in economics and a minor in American history. For the last 25 years, I've been running a small business here in the Capital Region, and my wife, Katie, who's here in the audience this evening, and I have 3 teenagers by the names of Kelly, Hope, and Mitchell. I've had an opportunity to live my humble version of the American dream, and I'm running to ensure that my kids and yours have the same opportunities to live free and prosper as Americans. And I'm greatly concerned that if we don't change directions away from the hard partisan agenda of Nancy Pelosi that Paul Tonko follows, they may not have those opportunities. That's why I'm running for Congress this year. That's why I'm asking for your support so that we can turn this great country around, reaffirm the values that made us great, and give everybody the opportunity to thrive again. Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll jump right into the audience questions. And again, if you have a question, please write it on the card. It will be collected by one of our volunteers tonight and sorted and reviewed here at the table to make sure that is appropriate. So along the theme of jobs and the economy, the first question does come back to you, Mr. Fischer. Okay. What would you have the federal government do to create jobs to further reduce unemployment?
Thank you very much. Well, as I alluded to in my opening statement, I have developed a 5-point plan called Thrive. It's an acronym, and have a couple of minutes. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about it. My Thrive initiative is a 5-point plan. It's a vision for economic victory. That's the V in Thrive. The 5 components of the plan are T, tax reform, H is for healthcare reform, R is for regulatory reductions, I is for infrastructure investments, and E is for energy independence. These are the things that I believe, first of all, that I would focus on directly and like a laser beam if I'm elected to Congress to get our economy back working again for all people, to grow jobs, to lower our unemployment rate, to raise wages. The thing that I've heard throughout this campaign from people around the district is how frustrated they are that their wages are stagnating, but the price of everything they're paying for is going up. It's the middle class squeeze that so many of us are experiencing. My wife and I are experiencing that as well. If we would focus on these 5 points of my Thrive initiative, we could get our economy growing at a 4 to 5% rate. I mentioned I was an economics major in college, so this is something I'm very passionate about. Our economy has been growing at 2% for the last several years. This is why jobs aren't being created. This is why wages are stagnant, why our unemployment rate is stuck at unacceptable levels. We have an opportunity to get our economy growing again. But unfortunately, over the last 5 or 6 years, the administration's policies that have been supported by Congressman Tonko have been counter to what we need to get our economy growing at a much faster pace that will create jobs. So I'd love to talk some more in specifics about my Thrive initiative. Don't think I have enough time to talk about all of it, but I'm sure throughout the evening we will. And I would suggest that you go to my website where I have some videos talking about each of the components, and I also have some written policy positions on that as well.
Mr. Tonko?
Yes, Chris, can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. What would you have the federal government do to create jobs to further reduce unemployment?
Well, I believe that investments need to be made, and certainly having a pay-for as we go forward. I think this is where I disagree with the elements of the Thrive plan that doesn't come up with a payment mechanism. And by the way, just to comply with the rules of this evening's forum, I will not attack the other side. I will answer in my defense that of course I would vote with Nancy Pelosi to provide for storm aid, which was so essential for New York. And of course I would vote with her to block 218 efforts to reduce or weaken environmental and health policy that were part of the votes of the 113th Congress. And of course I would make certain I would vote to invest in the resurgence of our economy. So I think those are important investments. I don't look at something as blue or red or oil and water. I make certain that I go forward and invest in our economy. I do that through the Grow Jobs Act, which would grow infrastructure improvements and have a funding mechanism by closing corporate tax loopholes, which is important to have a funding mechanism. That provides for millions, 1.4 million people in the trades to go to work, and then to build upon the foundation, the underpinnings of this area, which has been recognized as one of the 5 hottest areas in the country for clean energy, innovation, and job growth. We invest in research, infrastructure, human infrastructure, and in incentives for business to continue to improve manufacturing, to take it to an advanced manufacturing level where we retrofit and do smarter work as we compete in an international marketplace.
Thank you. Next question, and this will be for Mr. Tonko first.
Sure.
Do you support increasing the federal minimum wage? At what level should it be set if you believe an increase is needed?
Well, absolutely, I believe in increasing it. I believe the $10, 10-cent level is appropriate. I believe that you should not be working 1, 2, or 3 jobs as a family or as an individual and still be living in poverty. Still attending with your children at food pantries or soup kitchens to be able to sustain that family. That is fundamentally flawed and certainly un-American. I think as you give people more opportunity to have expendable cash, that improves the economic climate, the regional economy, by having businesses have stronger customers. So I think it speaks to a strengthener of sorts, and again, speaks to people's skills and talent and commitment to work, their work ethic, in a way that provides them just remuneration for the work that they do. In addition to that, I support the equal pay for equal work. Anything that will empower our families, where we'll take that gender bias and enable women working alongside their male counterparts and give them the just pay that they have earned, will be family strengtheners and regional economy improvements, which I think is a good way to continue the growth private sector-wise of our economy.
Mr. Fischer?
Yes, thank you. You know, the minimum wage is an important issue that we need to talk about, and the most important thing to look at is what will the results be of depending on what we would raise the minimum wage to. Now, I would support really each state being able to decide these things as they have. We have a higher minimum wage here in New York State than the federal minimum wage. The 1010 that Congressman supports, the Congressional Budget Office, which is non-biased, has reported that it would cost anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million jobs. That's what they estimate. Now, if the same report showed that if the minimum wage were raised to $9 per hour, that it would have a negligible impact, potentially a zero impact. I think it's really important that we make decisions based on what the best results are. What is the outcome that we're looking for? Are we looking to encourage employment, or are we going to do something that's going to benefit some but hurt others? So it's very important that we take a hard look at this. Now, throughout the campaign over the last 10 months, I've talked with a lot of small business owners. And one of the things that they tell me, you know, I talked with Ann Krause, who owns Krause's Homemade Candy, very, you know, successful business, been around for generations, a couple generations in their family. And she's saying, you know, Jim, we like to hire teenagers, give them their first opportunity to have a job. But if the minimum wage were raised to $10 per hour, we wouldn't be able to hire teenagers because they take too much time to train. We would have to hire people who are adults who then would be able to get up to speed quicker. Now, maybe that could be a good thing for those adults, but what about those people who are going to be starting for the first time? Here's the thing, the main point I want to make, though, as I wrap this up, is that minimum wage jobs are not an answer for a career. Minimum wage jobs are to be the start of a career, not how we shouldn't be ending in a minimum wage job. So it's important that we grow our economy so that people have opportunities to get out of minimum wage jobs.
Thank you. Next question, and we rotate back to Mr. Fischer.
Sure.
How will small business in your district benefit by you representing them?
It's a great question. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, as a small business owner for 25 years, I certainly understand the issues that small business people deal with. I deal with them, and I have been dealing with them for many years. I know what it's like to make a payroll, to try to make a payroll, and to balance a budget, to take care of customers and provide value every day. Now, my opponent, on the other hand, who talks a good line about supporting small businesses and being a big fan of small businesses, nonetheless has a 0% rating with the National Federation of Independent Businesses. That represents over 900 small businesses in the 20th Congressional District. That's thousands of people who are employed by these small businesses. They don't have somebody who's listening to them. When Congressman Tonko goes down to Washington, he ignores their needs. He does not stand up for them. I will be somebody who understands what small businesses are going through and are dealing with, and I will be fighting to implement policies that will support small businesses, because supporting small businesses means supporting the people who work for small businesses, the families who work. I mentioned just one, but there's so many. Around this area, most people get jobs from small businesses. Small businesses create the largest number of jobs around our country. So it's so important that we implement policies that improve, that work for small businesses, not just the large donors of large corporations that are donors to my opponent's campaign and so many other campaigns who are represented strongly in Washington. Small businesses don't seem to have a seat at the table, particularly with our current congressman, and they will if I'm elected to Congress.
Mr. Tonko?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Certainly, I think the performance that we've had in this district speaks for itself. We have worked with small business, with retail, with innovation startups. and have a small business forum where we tour businesses probably on average one a week, which is very good because we're in Washington doing the job much of the time. And it's that interaction, that dialogue, that helps significantly in formulating the policy and resource advocacy that's required. Also, for the innovation in this district, which is a strong bit of muscle. We have put together legislation that would allow for prototypes that are developed and don't get funded through some of the federal agencies that will fund some of the research, and when they get to that third step where they can go to product manufacturing, we kind of drop it. We've had legislation that we've pushed to help them with that effort. We also are looking with, part of our Make It in America agenda, which I support, is strengthening exporting. And small businesses, many of them as startups, will require exporting to be fully functional as an option for them. Also, I think it's important for us to develop a workforce by funding in education. Also, to the minimum wage again, I think that would be a strengthener, provide a stronger purchasing audience for the businesses. My opponent on that issue had talked earlier about indexing the minimum wage, would take it out to about $10.60 per hour, so that I would hope that the outcome would be that he would submit to the $10.10 recommendation that was made in Washington that ought to be approved. And as to teenagers getting them a minimum wage, I think when you understand from visiting with all of the neighborhoods in this district, many teenagers are part of that income that helps the family survive. And they are part of that breadwinning team that makes the whole outcome sustainable. And so we have to see it through various lenses in order to be most sensitive.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears here, go to energy and transportation. So this question comes back around to Mr. Tonko. What elements of energy policy would most benefit the U.S. in the future?
Well, I think that across the board, we need to pull down our gluttonous dependency on fossil-based fuels. That has us dependent on some enemy nations out there that utilize the $400 billion worth of energy consumers dollars that go into their treasuries, and they use those dollars to train their troops that fight our daughters and sons on the battlefield. So we can do the sustainable outcome that is energy policy, environmental policy, economic recovery policy, and national security policy across the board, a winning outcome. We do it by innovation, by coming up with new options. We underscore the importance of energy efficiency as our fuel of choice. We put together opportunities for not only energy efficiency, but renewables, making certain that renewables, utilizing the soil, the water, the air, the water in benign fashion, and come up with generation opportunities for the country. I think it's very important for us to look at what's happening in this district. The empowerment that comes by investing in an innovation economy is something that was cut by the Republican Party in the House that obviously would hurt this region. We need these underpinnings of research dollars, research investment, training, retraining opportunities. We don't cut those at a time when we have this area judged to be one of the 5 hottest bits of real estate for clean energy innovation job growth. We further sustain that, and that gives birth to spin-off businesses in the small business category and allows us to move into the transformational agenda for an energy economy that I think can sustain this region with new jobs not yet on the radar screen there, and making it very important for this area to continue to grow and prosper and create a new tech valley, a new surge of tech valley in this given Mohawk Valley Capital District region and Hudson Valley region.
Thank you. Mr. Fischer?
Yeah, so I support an all-of-the-above energy policy, which would incorporate investments in green energy and encouraging continued investments in green energy and renewables, as we've seen. There does come a point when, if there's too much government intervention in any type of approach, then it skews the market. And we saw things like Solyndra and other companies that were supported by the administration in such a way before they were actually ready for prime time, you might say. They weren't ready to go to market and to sustain themselves. So we need to be making sure that we are encouraging private investment, but not over-investing from a public standpoint. These public-private partnerships that Paul likes to talk about can be good in some places, But if we overdo it, we end up skewing the market to a point where, you know, you've got companies that really aren't viable that are taking taxpayer money and flushing it down the drain. And we've seen that happen, unfortunately. But we do need an all of the above energy policy that uses renewables as one source and works on reductions in our demand for energy by having more efficient technologies for our electrical grid and whatnot. But also, we do need to continue to have hydrocarbons. I mean, we are still pumping gas into our gas tanks. We all are starting to fire up our furnaces now as it's getting colder, and they're burning oil, they're burning propane, they're burning natural gas. We don't have solar panels that can heat our house at this point. But there are tremendous technological advances that we're hoping in time will make us less and less dependent. But the really good thing that's going on is that the United States of America is becoming energy independent. And it's because of the growth in our hydrocarbon development through fracking, through pumping of through horizontal drilling that we have, that's allowing our supply of oil and natural gas to be much higher than it's been in the past, which is why we're becoming self-sufficient.
Thank you. We'll come back around again, and along with the theme of mass transportation. Mass transit and bullet trains need funding. What amount of an increase would you support should mass transit be funded at the same level as highway funding from the federal government?
No, I would not recommend funding mass transit at the level that we would do for highway improvements because, again, it's the law of supply and demand. You know, unfortunately, we all, maybe it's unfortunate, maybe not, but we seem to have chosen to want to drive ourselves here and there. I think it's very good that we do have things like the buses on the Northway, that the expresses, that people can go to a park and drive, and then, you know, save gas there, and people are doing carpooling. These type of arrangements are excellent. But, you know, we still have cars. And mass transit, you know, we can't even keep Amtrak going. Amtrak is constantly in the red, and I don't think we should be throwing more money at more Amtraks to try to convert people when people are showing that they are not, particularly in this area where so many of us live out in the suburbs, the exurbs, or the rural parts of our area, where, you know, trains can't do that. Trains can go up and down between perhaps, you know, Saratoga and Albany, or out one way or the other, east and west. But they're not, we're still going to have to drive cars to get to them. So I don't think we're really in an area where mass transit is going to help us. Now, in other parts of the country, it can be helpful. But I don't suggest that we would take our funding that we currently have towards highways, which we really need more of, and then convert it over to mass transit. I don't think that would be a wise use of our resources.
Mr. Tonko?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Back when the American economy was losing 850,000 jobs a month in 2008, before the president assumed office and before I went to Congress, we turned that around by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It was the single largest down payment of energy policy in this country. It addressed issues like the unfair and unlevel playing field, where our renewables need that assistance. Some of the failure cited in an earlier response was about the unlevel playing field, where we have subsidized the oil industry and now ask renewables to go and compete on their own. The same is true with mass transit. We invested through that American Recovery and Reinvestment Act heavily in public mass transportation. We need not to keep growing the cars on the various lanes. We'll keep adding lanes as we go forward. That idle time is causing for additional carbon emission and greenhouse gas emissions. We need to have energy policy connected to transportation policy, connected to economic development policy, and we do that by addressing the woeful underfunding of rail that we've had in this nation. People go to Asia and Europe and come back and say, they're doing it with this significant aggressiveness, and we're still trapped in disinvesting in that system. which can create multimodal concepts that enable communities in the Mohawk Valley, the Capital District, and the Hudson Valley to be able to have new opportunities for work and travel. And we're in a great situation where in the northeast of this country, it's an easy connect to Boston, to New York City, to Montreal that can aid commerce in that outcome. So it has to be visionary, it has to be a commitment, a down payment that speaks to the neglectful portion of responding to mass transit over the decades.
Thank you. We've received quite a bit of questions, so I'm going to ask one more question on transportation policy because this is very specific to the capital region, Albany in particular, and then we'll move to another topic. What changes, and this is for you, Mr. Tonko, first, what changes in transportation policy would you support to make the oil-bearing trains coming in and through our area more safe?
Well, again, it's a connection of transportation and energy policy. In the immediate effort, I have written to, on occasions, and spoken eye to eye with Transportation Secretary Fox about the concern of Albany and many communities along the stretch of rail in the 20th Congressional District, concern about the exponential rise in the shipment of Bakken crude oil. And I had been encouraged, if not demanded, that they change their oversight, their regulation. They have put out there for study purposes their list of regulatory changes, ranging from making obsolete the 111 car, which is deemed by Canada and the U.S. to be inappropriate, especially after that Canadian tragedy. It also speaks to frontline training for those emergency responders in our community that come to that scene first and foremost, additional oversight and inspection, improvements of rail, monitoring the rail conditions so that there aren't that kind of those situations that speak to derailment. There are a number of situations in those regulations that are out there for study. The study period, the public comment period has exhausted. In just the last few days, they will now go to work and assemble all the thoughts that have been brought together. But in the bigger framework, we need to look at a comprehensive energy plan. That was the prime motivation for me to run for office, to serve in Congress. No nation this great, no economy this strong can continue without a comprehensive energy plan that includes the transportation sector. And until we get off our gluttonous dependency on fossil-based fuel and come up with alternative fuels, come up with concepts that will reduce our carbon emission, our greenhouse gas emission, and allow us to move forward with innovation, electric vehicles and the like, we will continue to struggle and not connect the dots of comprehensive energy plans.
Thank you. Mr. Fischer?
Yep, the trains will continue to come through Albany unless we have an alternative for transporting oil. We may have a gluttonous dependency on oil, but we're going to have that for a long time to come, regardless of how much we invest in renewable energy. We still need to put gas in our cars, we still need to heat our homes, and we still have a lot of electrical generation plants that are run on natural gas. It's becoming even more so in as much as coal has been pretty much shut down. So we are going to have trains coming through Albany unless we have pipelines to deliver the oil more safely from the Bakken crude locations to where they need to be processed and refined. Now, of course, Congressman Tonko is against the Keystone XL pipeline, and many people are who call themselves environmentalists, but what's our alternative? Our alternative now is that we have trains, and we all know how dangerous, potentially dangerous, these trains are. As the congressman mentioned about the situation up in Quebec, a horrible tragedy there. We certainly don't want anything like that happening anywhere, and certainly not here in Albany. So can we do some things? Yes, the 111 train car perhaps can be phased out over time, and we can perhaps look at slowing down the trains as they come through the city so that we have less of a danger potential for derailment. But in the short term and for the foreseeable future, we need oil. And that's why I think it's so important that we start to build pipelines, or at least the Keystone XL pipeline, to get that oil more safely delivered through to the refineries.
Thank you. Seeing as we're in the schoolhouse, I think we'll ask a few questions here about education. So back to you, Mr. Fischer. Student loan debt is rising, and so are the cost of education. Can you highlight some of your plans and or efforts to help aid graduates in reducing student loan debt?
Well, this is near and dear to my heart. I think I mentioned that I have a 19-year-old. She just started college this year. And so, my wife and I are starting to pay those bills, and so this is near and dear to our hearts. The student loan program, it's an interesting scenario that the student loan program was taken and lumped into the Obamacare bill. And all of a sudden, interest rates doubled on the student loans. And now the Congress has come back and straightened that situation out. And now we're getting back to where we have market rates for student loans. That was a mistake that they made. I'm glad it's been rectified. But we need to make sure that there is robust competition in our student loan market so that rates are low. And having the federal government take things over and taking the competition out of it is not going to do the trick. So we need to be doing whatever we can to make sure we have robust competition and that the rates are low. As far as the cost of education, there's a lot of things that we can do individually. A lot of people don't necessarily need to start out at an expensive four-year school, and we're seeing that more and more. Students are going to perhaps Hudson Valley Community College or Schenectady Community College to get their gen ed requirements, and then transitioning on to wherever their school of choice would be for their majors. That's one way that families can help to lower costs on their own. We do need to start seeing that cost curve of higher education bend downwards, because it's been growing at much higher than the rate of inflation for many years. So do I have 1 minute left, or is that supposed to be red? It's 30 seconds. Okay, great. So it's very important that we start seeing the cost of higher education coming down, and that. But I'm not sure the federal government has a huge role that they can play in doing that. We certainly can be offering TAP grants, Pell grants, whatever, to help people get the assistance, low-income people particularly, get the assistance that they need. And then we need to make sure that we've got a healthy student loan marketplace for private loans.
Mr. Tonko?
Sure. Thank you. Well, my record is pretty clear on this, so I'll go through it rather quickly. Some comment had been made about how I vote and with whom I vote. Well, look, I would not vote with the Republicans in the House who stop the efforts on the floor to bring an opportunity to students in this country to refinance their loans. If we allow it in other sectors, for homes, for various debt situations, why not for our students? 71% of them are saddled with debt after getting their degree from a four-year institution, and that average debt is about $30,000. So I think that bill would go a long way. I have also voted against efforts by Republicans in the House to cut Pell grants, and also voted on a measure that would cap the interest rise on these loans. I think that was helpful, but it's not the total answer. And I've also worked on situations where if you have a federal education loan, and if you're working in a public sector situation, we would cap your repayment of that loan at 10% of the salary that you've received. So I think those are important steps that we need to do. I do not agree with the other party during the presidential campaigns when they said, suffocate your dreams, live accordingly to your family budget. That's not America at her best. Back to the situation on pipelines. I represented an assembly district that witnessed deaths when we had a propane line explosion. So whether we ship by rail or pipe, it's dangerous. I think also we need to understand that when we commit to some of these efforts, again, a vote that I didn't agree with from the Republicans, they disallowed that pipeline to allow for that source of fuel source to be contained for American use. They want it to go right to the spigot to the Gulf, and it goes into the international cartel. So there are many votes I've taken that are not good for this district or good for energy policy, and just wanted to point that out from the previous question.
Thank you. Since the implementation of Common Core, federally mandated English and math tests have increased from 3 hours pre-Common Core to now over 9 hours of testing for 3rd through 8th grades. These tests are now deemed developmentally inappropriate for that age group by both parents and educators. Do you believe that these federally mandated tests are still beneficial, or do you now consider these tests counterproductive to student educational and emotional growth? Mr. Tonko, this is yours.
Well, I believe, a lot of controversy has stirred around the Common Core. It was a coming together of private sector, not-for-profit, and departments of education across the country speaking to the federal government about their desire back at home to come up with higher standards. Look, 84% of the public believes that education standards should be made more rigorous to prepare our children for college or career. 74% see creating standards that establish shared goals and expectations for students where they're not learning by a test, but rather having good skills, problem-solving skills, and applied skills that will be useful in the upcoming economy, the innovation economy. So I think the efforts there that we need to make to improve standards are driven by the public sentiment. It's how quickly we do that and just how fine-tuned those standards are. I think we need to work with the education community to make certain that those standards are established in the most meaningful and effective way without frightening our students, without demoralizing or dissuading them from the value of education, but at the same time the rapidity in which they're introduced is important too. But standards are very much agreed to across so many surveys out there where the general public is asking for improvements that raise that standard of education so that our students can compete effectively in an international marketplace of the future.
Thank you. Mr. Fischer?
Yeah, I am foursquare opposed to Common Core. It's a federal takeover of our education system. It's nothing short of that. And, it was developed by nonprofit agencies or whatever, the government, whatever it was, the National Association of Governors. And this is, it sounds like a quasi-governmental agency, but it's nothing of the sort. It was funded very much by Bill Gates, and it's going in the wrong direction. We absolutely have a right to hold our students and need to hold our students and teachers to high standards. But Common Core goes about it in the wrong way. It's a failed program. We need to acknowledge that immediately because students are struggling. Here in Albany, you have a 54% graduation rate. That's so sad. That's tragic. That's 46% of people who are heading on the wrong path in life and not going to be able to have some of the opportunities, that I've had and so many of us have. We have to make learning enjoyable again. We have to keep kids in school and find ways to make sure that the kids are enjoying learning and that the teachers enjoy teaching them and give power back to the teachers. Common Core has taken power away from the teachers and away from parents, and it has been a flawed program, not just in the implementation, as the congressman has said. So it's extremely important that we do get rid of Common Core, and I will do everything I can, if elected to Congress, to uproot Common Core at the federal level and work with people here locally, with school boards, with teachers and teachers' unions, to develop appropriate sets of standards wherever we can to get our kids on track so they can compete in the global economy, so that they will be prepared for the life that's going to be ahead of them, in this very challenging economic environment. And Common Core is just the wrong way to go about it. So, I can't be any more clear about it. This is some place where Congressman Tonko and I differ very greatly. I am foursquare against Common Core. He supports the standards, but says the implementation is flawed.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Fischer, on this one. What policies, what is your opinion on the policies that are currently being discussed in Washington that are aimed at assisting urban school districts to provide an equal opportunity for education for all children? In particular, what about students of color?
Could you repeat the question for me again?
Certainly. In your opinion, what policies, of the policies that are currently being discussed in Washington, of those that will assist urban school districts in providing an equal opportunity for all children, but specifically children of color?
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thanks for repeating that. I just mentioned about the graduation rate here in the city of Albany, and we have that in many of our cities around the country. And it's tragic, and it's absolutely something. Education is the pathway out of poverty. I think we all know that. So it is so important that we get our education system right, and we do whatever it takes to be encouraging children, students to stay in school and work hard to get an education. Now, you know, not every student, you know, like myself, not every student was going to be a brain surgeon. You know, but their students will perhaps get into trades or into businesses of their own or whatever. But we need to find pathways for children to find their niche in life, that they can learn a trade or learn a skill that they can then have a positive role in society and find something that they love to do and that they're willing to work hard at. So, you know, and I think it's got to be colorblind in this situation, absolutely. Students of color, African American students, are having poorer outcomes, unfortunately, than we see of Caucasians. And that's very tragic. So we need to be focusing on that in any way we can. And I would just say that we need to be focusing on a myriad of ways to address the situation. But I can't say I can point to one particular thing that would, you know, at this moment, that would perhaps answer that question the way you like.
Mr. Tonko?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ellis. I think the question was what programs are being discussed and what would you reach to? There are many. I would address Title I. Let's bring it back to its basics and fund it to the fullest. We don't need new programs. Title I speaks to inordinate need in the classroom. When I was in the State Assembly and I asked to be placed on this Education Committee, I advanced the notion of distribution of education money based on ability to pay at home and need in the classroom. When you do that, you get progressive distribution. You empower our children from all neighborhoods. Also special ed. Special ed is something that can really disrupt the local budget, especially in our urban cores. You need, again, to fund that if it's a requirement from Washington and it's a requirement that speaks to fundamental needs. Don't walk away from the requirement or the commitment. Fund it to a level that assists our schools in the most important way. STEM education, mentoring, making certain our students of color, especially, or our children who are in impoverished situations, understand what is there as an opportunity for a career with science, technology, engineering, and math. Let them be introduced to those opportunities with mentoring programs and incentives that are provided for those. And STEM education. I have a bill that speaks to a fungible notion of school aid from the federal government that would allow for transitioning over to STEM education, prepping the teachers and the educators and the school systems and purchasing equipment with those dollars. And finally, I've participated in each and every Black Families Engineering Awareness Day at RPI, which allows us, again, from a higher ed perspective, to encourage those campuses to connect very well, very strongly with our students, and especially in this way, which is targeted to reach the Black families, to let our children know of career options out there that will produce probably the most opportunity for career based on the innovation economy in this region.
Thank you. Going to switch gears again here. There's a large senior population which continues to grow. Finding affordable in-home care is very difficult for those who are deemed ineligible for assistance. What can be done about this issue?
Well, there are a number of issues that came about with the Affordable Care Act, which enables people to maintain wellness through preventative efforts. We were able to make certain that the pharmaceutical Part D program of Medicare was assisted by closing the donut hole by the year 2020. Already, many savings have been secured for the 12,000 seniors of this district who have benefited from that. Wellness programs, annual checkups, the screenings that are done, helps them to be in stronger stead for long-term care. The long-term insurance program is something that we need to foster, making certain that we make it an eligible, affordable, accessible branch of extension of what Affordable Care Act is doing in terms of our insured and underinsured, making certain those programs are there, and also to have long-term care addressed out of institutional settings where we provide for public health nursing and nursing assistance and with home delivery systems, providing the incentives for those which requires training in the nursing profession for those long-term care opportunities. But primarily, I think it comes with a long-term insurance program concept that will enable, especially baby boomers as they grow into senior status, to have that stability and flexibility as we grow older. It's going to be important for the sake of our health outcomes to have that long-term care insurance and offering ancillary pieces that will avoid institutional setting.
Thank you. Mr. Fischer?
Well, it's certainly important that seniors have the option to stay home. You know, we all want to be able to stay in our own homes as long as possible, and I've seen that happen, you know, in my own family and with others who have had parents who have, you know, grown older and can, you know, take less and less care of themselves, but they want to stay home as long as possible. So I do think we need to have programs that would allow people to do that. Certainly long-term care is something that people can purchase that would give them the opportunity to, you know, have that as an option. But as far as Medicare goes, you know, I have to bring up that the Medicare was cut by $716 billion in the Obamacare bill. Medicare Advantage, which is one of the most popular parts of Medicare, was cut. $156 billion was cut through the Obamacare bill. I've been hearing from so many seniors across the district who are struggling. You know, they're having to make decisions about whether or not to pay for the increased co-pays to get their medication or to buy food. You know, I hear these stories from people who care for seniors. These are very sad stories, and these are some of the changes that are taking place. Here in the 20th Congressional District, seniors will be impacted by the cuts in Medicare to the tune of $2,100 per year on average each senior. Now, I'd be happy to give the reference to that if anybody wants to find out where that comes from. But I have that, and that is a fact. So, you know, when you cut $716 billion out of a program, that's going to come from somewhere. And where is it coming from? It's coming from each and every one of our seniors. They're struggling. And, you know, we need to restore that. Obamacare has helped a few people, but it has hurt many more people than it has actually helped. So I'm saying we need to revamp Obamacare. We need to work to get it so that we restore some of those cuts back into Medicare and allow people to you know, have real choices and real competition within the healthcare marketplace so that our seniors and people of all ages have the opportunity to get the healthcare that they need at whatever age they might be.
Thank you. I've been told by the Fund Police that we only have a limited amount of questions left, so I'm going to jump around here and try to get some broad topics and talk about some stuff that's a little different. That being said, we'll talk about one of the most controversial issues and fundamental. Please explain your position on gun control.
Sure. Well, I am against any additional restrictions on or additions to gun control laws. You know, we have a lot of laws on the books, and we do have registration, and we have background checks now through the federal government, and they're helpful. You know, it's interesting. I just read an article today, I actually brought it with me, that, you know, that talks about the reduction in gun violence over the past many years, where gun ownership has gone up tremendously, but gun violence and gun crimes have plummeted over the same amount of years. Now, one murder, one mass shooting is too many. Any type of gun crime is horrible. But the statistics show that in spite of the fact that gun sales continue to go up dramatically over the past many years, that gun crimes are going down. Those are facts. So adding more gun laws in and of itself will not reduce gun violence. Now, last night I was at an event with a gentleman who is a former U.S. Marshal, and he talked about how he would go on raids, and he had gone on one because he's also now assistant sheriff or a deputy sheriff out in Montgomery County. He's running for state assembly, Pete Froman. And he talked about how they had gone on a raid, and there were a lot of weapons there, long guns, AR-15s. They were all unregistered guns. It's the old story that, you know, when guns become criminalized, only criminals will have guns. This is common sense, and it's true. Criminals don't care if they're breaking another law. They're not going to register their guns. They're not going to comply with background checks. So, you know, I always say the trigger doesn't pull itself. We have to be looking at mental health issues. We have to be looking to making sure that people who potentially could be a danger to themselves or others don't have access to guns. And it's so important that people are securing their guns properly. But that comes through training. It doesn't come through adding more laws to the already sufficient laws that we have on the books.
Thank you. Mr. Tonko?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ellis. A poll taken as recently as July found that 92% of gun owners support enhanced universal background checks. I think everyone can agree we need to take the proper steps. Again, since our last forum, we've been visited by more carnage, this time in Washington State. And it speaks to the pain and suffering of folks from Newtown and Littleton and Virginia Tech and all of the situations across the country where we've witnessed these perpetrators bringing down our loved ones. Of the 143 guns possessed by perpetrators of mass killings in the past 30 years, more than 75% were obtained legally. So I think it speaks to a sounder, fine line that we need to take to better balance the situation. You protect rights, the Second Amendment rights, but you also provide for greater background checks that I think are important. There have been like 33,000 gun deaths each year in this country. That's like losing a city of Albany every 3 years. Think of it. It's a huge impact, and we need to do better. Yes, we need to do more with a sound omnibus bill on mental health that will provide services to those who are living with mental illness or mental health disorders. We're working away at something like that in the House of Representatives. I champion the efforts for mental health here with parity, known as Timothy's Law in the New York State Assembly. When you combine parity here at home in New York with the parity issues in Washington that were done at the federal level shortly after we took care of that business, you have the best outcome in the country. But we have cut too deeply. Again, cuts that have been made by those that my opponent wants to serve with. The Republicans have cut programs that have been very meaningful to the very fabric of our communities, and we need to make certain that the mental health services are there and they're in full stead.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Tonko. Do you feel there is a role for the federal Justice Department in any of the ongoing activities in Ferguson, Missouri?
I think there is a role. Obviously, the courts are cleaning through the situation, and there were tragedies that were expressed. People have seen perhaps very difficult situation where we found a youngster losing his life. And I think that federal guidance here, perhaps looking at resources that are required or legislation that would help avoid a reoccurrence like that would be very important. I think the Justice Department can be very instructive to us in the legislative branch, and if we need to have additional protection or more punitive measures or more education, so be it, but let's learn from that tragedy, which has been very painful for the community and the country.
Thank you.
It is a very tragic situation that took place in Ferguson, Missouri. And, you know, what continues to go on is sad, but it's indicative of the fact that we do still have, you know, some racial issues in our country. There's no doubt about it. We have to accept that and acknowledge that. You know, America is an imperfect place. And, you know, my hero is Abraham Lincoln, who talked about, you know, creating a more perfect union. That's the continual process of America, is to go about creating a more perfect union. We need to be repairers of the breach. That was another line from Abraham Lincoln, borrowed from Scripture. That's what we need to be. We shouldn't be, you know, driving wedges into these situations and tearing people apart. As far as, is there a role for the federal government in Ferguson? You know, we've seen the Department of Justice get involved. You know, if they're doing an oversight role to make sure that there's fairness taking place in the justice system out there, I think that's appropriate. But we need to wait on justice. We need to trust our system, that there is a justice system in our country that, while not perfect, actually does work. And we all need to work on being repairers of the breach. So I would just like to if I could, go back to one thing. You know, we see this time and time again throughout these forums and debates. The congressman is trying to tie me in with the Republicans in Congress, the people he wants to serve with. I just have to clarify, you know, I'm the new guy in the room here. I have said I will be an independent. I have made a commitment to vote for new leadership in Congress, including in my own party, if I'm elected. So if you're looking for somebody who will be a true independent to represent you down in Washington, not somebody who's just a party line voter, as the congressman has been, I would be that true independent. So it's very important that I bring that up, because he keeps going back to how, you know, the Republicans I would serve with and how I would potentially vote if I was down there.
Thank you. Last question, and then we'll have closing statements. This is to you, Mr. Fischer.
Thank you.
Do you think the constituents of the 20th Congressional District are more better off now than they were 6 years ago? Yes or no, please explain.
Yeah, well, clearly, I wouldn't be running for Congress if I thought that they were better off than they were 6 years ago. And if I thought that we would be well served for Congressman Tonko continuing for another 2 years, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have taken a year away from my business and my family and all the things that I've done. And I consider myself tremendously blessed to have had this opportunity. But I did it because I feel so passionately that our country is going in the wrong direction, that the outcomes that we've been seeing take place over the past 6 years are not what they should be. One of the things that we have said, and I've heard it from people that I've been talking with over the last 9-10 months, is we can do better than this. We must do better than this. We must have better outcomes for the people of the 20th Congressional District and for the people of the United States of America than what we've seen. Our government is failing us in so many ways. It's failing to provide basic services, failing to protect us, failing to secure our border, failing to take care of the veterans who served for us and gave so much for us. They deserve better. Our families deserve better. Working people deserve better. And yes, small businesses deserve better treatment than they've been getting under this administration as backed by Congressman Tonko. So I absolutely believe that we are not better off necessarily than we were 6 years ago. I will say this, the economy crashed 6 years ago. It started to come back, but because of the policies that have been implemented by the Obama administration with support of Congressman Tonko, we are muddling along. We should be doing much better. We should be growing at that 4 to 5% rate. At this point in an economic recovery, 2% is not doing the job. So that's why I decided to get into this race, because I do feel very passionately. We must do better. And, you know, if we would implement the policies that I've been talking about, my Thrive initiative, we will do better.
Mr. Tonko?
Sure. The range of unemployment for the 5 counties in the 20th Congressional District ranged from 4.4% to 6.6%. Now, obviously, we always want to do better. But when you think of the low point, which was 3 months into that 6-year stretch that you cite in the question, at the very beginning of that stretch, we hit our low point in March of '09. We were losing, again, 850 to 900,000 jobs per month. That has been turned around. So universally, nationwide, that's been a better outcome, and it affects all of the congressional districts around the country. But here at home, we've been improving with this innovation economy. We've had, again, the fastest growing rate in the country, one of the 5 hottest areas of real estate, and the Assistant Secretary of Energy, Dave Danielson, said we're 2 of the most exponentially rising of those 5. So in that regard, we're doing better. But there are still those pockets. You know, the highest unemployment rate in the state is in the Bronx at 8.5%, so we're vastly better off than that. And even in regard to the national unemployment rate, but we want to do better. The president has sent forward a Grow Jobs Act. He has put initiatives forward before Congress. They are dead on arrival simply because they're coming from the White House. And so that incalcitrance, that rigidity to just not do what the president wants to do, has not incorporated a bipartisan legislative executive kind of partnership that can do what's best for the country. And I find it deplorable that we haven't moved forward in more aggressive terms to get that done. So room for improvement, but I think with the deficit having been cut severely ahead of schedule, that is a sign for hope. As we go forward, we're going to continue to invest in that growing axis of our region, the innovation economy, the nanoscience, the microchip manufacturing. All of those efforts will then provide for other sectors of our regional economy, from service sector over to manufacturing, to do better. We need to invest. We cut where we can so that we invest where we must to have the most promising, hope-filled tomorrow.
Thank you. We'll now do closing remarks, and based off the coin toss, Mr. Tonko will go first, and Mr. Fischer will close.
Thank you again to all who hosted us this evening, and to my opponent for offering choice in this campaign, to Mr. Ellis, our moderator, and our panel of that have fielded the questions. I find this opportunity to serve the 20th Congressional District at this given moment a great opportunity for our region because of the investments, public-private partnership that has been made to this point in time. As an engineer who worked as an engineer before I served in county government and while I served in county government, and having chaired the Energy Committee in the State Assembly, and having led as President and CEO NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and now seated on Energy and Commerce, and being the ranker, I am the top Democrat on the Subcommittee of Environment and the Economy. All of that is a hand-in-glove fit as we go forward to speak to the dynamics that are most powerful, most resurging for this district. I think that kind of experience is important. I have worked very closely with the business community to develop our public-private partnerships. You know, my opponent talks about siding with one person or another and labeling it a liberal and all. That statement speaks to the fundamental dysfunction in Washington. When you start taking that us and them attitude, the oil and water attitude, where you will not get things done. I have a track record of having worked in a bipartisan fashion, working on a bill that addressed hydrants for our communities across the country, working with Representative Johnson from Ohio, working with my colleague from Minnesota to get a truckers bill done, working with our neighbor in the 21st Congressional District to develop energy policy so that we can move forward in progressive opportunities as we better provide more efficiency in the turbine manufacturing that we do, working in a bipartisan way to get our export-import bank done so that we can move forward and offer more opportunity for our businesses. I am proud of a track record of having worked in a bipartisan fashion with levels of government across the board so as to best understand that, and as a small business owner in the past too, to know that we can empower the engine of our economy, the small business community.
Thank you. Mr. Fischer?
Yes, I want to thank you also, Mr. Ellis, and all of the folks who have come out this evening and the hosts of this forum. And I thank Congressman Tonko for being here as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, we can and we must do better than we are doing. I'm listening to what Congressman Tonko is saying, and what I'm hearing him say, I'm hearing him quote percentages of this and percentages of that, but what I'm really hearing him saying is, hey, we're doing good enough. We're not doing good enough, ladies and gentlemen, and I think you know that. We all know that. We can do better. We must do better. Now, the congressman has had 40 years in elected office, and he's had 6 years in Congress. He's had 6 years to deliver results for the people of the Capital Region. He hasn't done that. In our first debate, he was asked point blank, what have you done? What have you delivered to our district? Nothing. He was asked, what have you done for your hometown of Amsterdam? Nothing. He has served for 40 years in elected government. Go and ask the folks in Amsterdam if they are better off because Congressman Tonko has been a leader from their community. And this is not personal. These are facts. Facts are stubborn things. We can quote all the percentages of this and that we want, but facts are stubborn things. If you are looking for a true independent who will work hard to deliver results, because delivering results is what I have done my whole life, then I ask for your support. I have spent my life, working hard and volunteering in the community, working with my wife to raise a family, and I look forward to an opportunity to serve in this way. I'm tremendously grateful for this opportunity. I think if really what it comes down to for you folks is if you think we're doing good enough, then I say Congressman Tonko deserves another couple of years in office. But if you think we can do better, if you think you really want somebody who will work with people across the aisle, he could talk about being bipartisan, but the facts, again, show that he is one of the most partisan members of Congress. And I will work. I have always worked with people of any persuasion, of any beliefs, to bring real results, and that's what I hope to be able to offer you and bring to the people of the 20th Congressional District if you'll elect me. And I thank you very much.
Let's have a round of applause for our candidates.